The Fiat 500e is among one of my favourite small-sized electric vehicles, but the 600e is its larger sibling. Now, at the time of filming and in the UK, the manufacturer is offering £3,000 off the list price, at least for retail customers, meaning that the 600e starts from just shy of £30,000, while if you go for the top spec La Prima, it will come in at just £34,000. So in this review, you can see if it's actually worth its price tag and how it compares to some of its competitors. So to kick things off, let's talk about its electric range. And very much like other vehicles from the Stellantis group, the Fiat 600e houses the same 54 kilowatt-hour gross or 51 kilowatt-hour net battery pack. There is also a heat pump that comes included as standard, which is certainly appreciated. And the manufacturer claims that you'll get roughly 253 miles at least on the WLTP test cycle. However, from my own mixed driving test, I netted between 200 to 220 miles, which ironically is absolutely identical to what I actually netted in the Jeep Avenger. Now, it's worth considering, however, that the 600e is significantly cheaper than the Jeep Avenger, and it's also a lot better in terms of the overall range in comparison to the Fiat 500e, as you'll be able to see from this mileage leaderboard, where the latter actually got roughly 140 to 160 miles from my own mixed driving test. Suffice to say that the 600e actually does fare pretty well, specifically considering its overall price tag. Now, for you to be as efficient as possible, there is a degree of regenerative braking, and there is a button that is found towards the center console. Right now I'm in B mode, so I'm just going to accelerate a little bit towards this bus and then lift off. And as you'll be able to see, that the vehicle starts decelerating relatively rapidly, but in my opinion, it's not as harsh as it should be. Indeed, you haven't got a one-pedal drive. The same sort of complaint was said about all of the other vehicles from the Stellantis group. It would have been great if there was a degree of customization or indeed that full one-pedal drive, because it makes those inner city drives a little less cumbersome. Now, of course, you do have the ability of plugging it in, and via CCS port, it'll take up to 100 kilowatts of input, therefore allowing you to go from 20 to 80% in just 27 minutes. Via its Type 2 port, it has actually got an 11 kilowatt onboard charger, and therefore if you do have access to a 3-phase power supply, you can go from 0 to 100% in 5 hours and 45 minutes. While if you do connect it up to a regular wall box, it'll take you roughly 8 hours, while a 3-pin socket will take you over 30 hours. So what about when it comes to performance? Well, here there is a single front mounted motor which dispatches all the power to the front wheels. Indeed, you've got a front wheel drive configuration. Now, in its sport mode preset, you will get the maximum amount of power, 115 kilowatts or 154 horsepower and 260 newton meters of torque. In the normal mode, this drops down to 80 kilowatts or 109 horsepower and 220 newton meters of torque, and in eco mode it goes down to 60 kilowatts or 82 horsepower and 180 newton meters of torque. Now, I actually had it tested using RaceLogic's Performance Box Touch from 0 to 20 miles an hour in 2.44 seconds, 0 to 30 miles an hour in 3.68 seconds, 0 to 60 miles an hour in 8.65 seconds, and note that is pretty much bang on to the manufacturer's 0 to 62 mile an hour claim of 9 seconds, and then 50 to 70 miles an hour in 4.78 seconds, and a peak acceleration of just 0.3 hg. Top speed is rated at 93 miles an hour. Now, indeed, the vehicle's performance is quite lackluster, specifically if you consider some of the alternatives out there on the market. But nonetheless, I do think it will certainly suffice for most consumers. What's more important, however, is the overall driving comfort. And in this respect, the vehicle is actually tuned to perfection. Now, sure enough, its suspension system is a little bit stiff in comparison to some alternatives out there, even from the Stellantis group themselves, with the likes of the Citroën EC4 or EC4X, but in this respect, it's far superior than the Jeep Avenger, which suffered from low-end resonance when traversing on uneven terrain. That's not the case in the 600e, so I'm very pleased to see that Fiat has actually thought about the insulating material. Furthermore, the steering wheel is actually very light, making the vehicle very easy to maneuver. But on the flip side, it does mean that the Fiat doesn't exactly incite that overall driver's feel, or indeed that level of confidence when you're going around winding country routes. This is in part due to the fact that you've got a front-wheel drive configuration, and that you also suffer from a bit of body roll if you're going to be really chucking around winding country routes. So aside from how he's on the road, what about when it comes to its interior design? Well, given the overall price point of the 600e and also the Fiat pedigree, I've actually got no complaints whatsoever. It certainly does stand out in comparison to, for example, the MG4 EV. Yes, indeed, you have got really nice stitching work around the upholstery. You've got nice use of materials towards the dashboard and even in terms of the door frames. The overall design and the look of it certainly is there. Of course, you're still going to get some cheap plastic around the dashboard, but I've not got any major complaints. I also love the fact that Fiat has preserved some physical buttons. You'll find them on the steering wheel and also towards the dashboard, where they'll serve as shortcut buttons for the infotainment system. For example, your climate controls. You've also still got a physical knob for the volume. Now, as for the infotainment system, it's actually very responsive. You've got a 10.25-inch display, which has got a pretty intuitive feel to it, at least when you get your head around it. It also supports Android Auto and Apple CarPlay over a wired and wireless transmission. It's worth noting, if you do want the built-in navigation system, you'll have to go for the La Prima trim, because it's not available in the entry-level red model. Now, no matter if you're using the built-in navigation system or the third-party mobile operating systems, you will be pleased to know that turn-based navigation data does feed through to the 7-inch instrument cluster. Indeed, this fully digitalized display does provide you all the key information that you require, and it's good to see that level of integration is also there, which isn't the same that could be said about some of its rivals. It is a shame, however, that a head-up display is not offered, be it in the more expensive trim level or indeed available as an option. Speaking of which, there's no means of actually changing the audio system, because in the entry-level red trim you'll have a 4-speaker setup, while in the La Prima model you'll have a 6-speaker configuration. The latter does relatively well across the sound frequency range and will keep most people excited, but it's certainly not going to compete with more audiophile-centric products out there. So moving on, let's talk about storage. And towards the front of the cabin you've got the glove box, although it's a shame that it's not been optimized for right-hand drive vehicles, which I do think is quite lazy from the manufacturer. Nonetheless, you have got the door bins where they'll accommodate a 500ml bottle with ease alongside some small to medium-sized valuables. However, it's a shame yet again not to see any sort of fabric material, therefore meaning that your loose change or keys will be heard rattling about when you're traversing uneven terrain. Now, towards the center of the dashboard, you'll find a small little cubby hole, which can be handy for placing your wireless key fob or your wallet or small size purse. And then you have got a 15-litre compartment, which is comprised underneath an iPad-like cover. This is also removable if you so wish. Here you'll find a wireless charger, which is present in the top spec La Prima trim, and then you'll find a 12-volt socket alongside a USB Type-A and Type-C port. The latter is used for connecting up to the infotainment system. There is another USB Type-C port that is found towards the rear of the center console. So moving down the center console, you'll find a small customizable area with these small little plastic inserts, allowing you to place, let's say, a can or small size water bottle, or indeed you can fully open it up for that increased amount of storage. You have also got the small compartment that is found within the center armrest, although it's relatively narrow, so you're not going to fit any sort of large size goods. As for the rear of the cabin, it's pretty limited. You have not got a pull-down armrest compartment for your cup holders, and the door bins are pretty much non-existent. Now, of course, you have got its boot, where you've got 360 litres to play around with, or if you drop down the seats, 1,231 litres, which is far superior than its smaller sibling, the 500e, which sat at 185 and 550 litres respectively. Sure enough, it's not exactly class-leading figures, but it will certainly suffice for doing your weekly shops. Furthermore, it's actually pretty practical, with a hatchback design. You've also got 60/40 rear split folding seats. In the La Prima model, you'll also have an adjustable boot floor, which means that you've got a small little underfloor compartment for your charging cables, and you've also got an electric tailgate that comes fitted as standard in the top spec variant. Now, I should also point out that the rear seats have not got any sort of seatbelt runners, which makes it a little bit more cumbersome if you're going to be dropping down the seats regularly. A complaint that I have about some of its competitors as well, but just something I thought I should highlight in the 600e. Now, as for the overall seating comfort, I've got no issues whatsoever. The seats themselves are actually very accommodating and soft. At the front, you will also find in the La Prima model that they become heated, and also you have got 6-way electronic controls for the driver's seat with a massage function, which is very much appreciated. Now, as for headroom towards the rear of the cabin, it's a little bit limited, but certainly should suffice given that the vehicle itself is pretty compact. However, legroom is going to be a bit of an issue, specifically if you're transporting adults. It of course won't be a problem if you have got children or younger adults, but it's just something worth highlighting, specifically comparing this vehicle to slightly larger SUVs. It's also further disappointing that you still have a transmission tunnel in a fully electric vehicle. Moving swiftly on, let's talk about its exterior design, and I'll be curious to know what you make of it down the comment section below. Subjectively, I don't think it's as cute looking as the 500e, but it still has got that stylish profile, and of course that is due to Fiat's DNA. At the front, you'll see it thanks to the headlights and the bonnet, and towards the side you have actually got 16-inch steel wheels, which actually don't look too bad in the red trim, while in the La Prima model you'll have much more stylish 18-inch diamond cut alloys. It is a shame, however, that the automaker has still preserved plastic wheel arches and side skirts, but thankfully they don't protrude too much from the exterior shell. As for the rear, I've got no complaints whatsoever. It fits in with Fiat's other vehicles and still preserves the remnants of the 500e. Now, as for your colour options, the red model comes, as with the name suggests, in red as standard. However, you can go for a black or white finish for an additional £600. The La Prima model, however, really ups the ante, with the sea, earth, sky or sun of Italy finishes really standing out in comparison to what else you can find out there on the market. So what about when it comes to safety? Well, at the time of filming, the Fiat 600e has not been tested by Euro NCAP, so I can't talk about its overall crash safety scores. But what I can comment about are the driver assistance systems. Now, as standard on both trim levels, you'll find cruise control and intelligent speed assistant, drowsy driver detection, traffic sign information, autonomous emergency brake, lane keep assist, which by the way can actually be pretty easily disabled by pressing a shortcut button found on the dashboard and then going on the infotainment system and disabling said option. And in the La Prima model, you'll find blind spot detection with adaptive cruise control, which actually does work a treat on the motorway, keeping you at a safe distance from the leading vehicle. Now, as for parking and visibility, it's a little bit limited, at least towards the front. As someone who's just under 6 foot, I feel that the placement of the rear view mirror does obscure some of my frontal vision. The same complaints were said of pretty much every single vehicle I've reviewed from the Stellantis group. Nonetheless, the A-pillars are relatively thin and you've got good openings towards the side. The same could be said towards the rear, also thanks to the fact that you have also got a wiper. Although it's pretty disappointing that you've only got rear parking sensors in the red trim. If you want front, side and rear parking sensors and also a 180-degree camera, then you'll actually have to splash out on the La Prima trim. So with all that in mind, it brings me on to my verdict. And truthfully, I was actually taken back by the Fiat 600e. Sure enough, it shares many similarities with other vehicles from the Stellantis group, with Peugeot, Vauxhall, Citroën and even Jeep. However, it does stand out in comparison to its siblings and even indeed its competitors. It's very stylish both inside and out. It also has got good use of technology within the cabin and plenty of driver assistance systems that come featured as standard. You've also got a more practical design thanks to its larger boot in comparison to the smaller 500e. More importantly, however, it's pretty comfortable to drive and also has got a decent electric range. Combining all of this at a tempting price of roughly £30,000 to £34,000 depending on which trim level you go for, and it makes this vehicle easy to recommend. As such, it gets our Best Buy award. Now I'd be curious to know what you make of the 600e down in the comment section below, and if you would pick it over some of its rivals. Now, if you have enjoyed this detailed independent review, definitely do consider dropping a like, subscribing and hitting that bell notification, all of which would be greatly appreciated. As such, I've been Chris from TotallyEV, and I'll hopefully see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves, and goodbye.